What is up, people, and welcome back to the Story Strengthcast with myself, Shane Story. Today we're going to be talking about Christmas. Last week, I did say we were going to talk about the gaining phase as well as Christmas, and I talked so long about the gaining phase, I never got around to Christmas. Really, Christmas is an entire episode that we need to do because it's something I actually haven't talked about before. Like, I haven't made an episode on it just yet, despite having recorded an episode through Christmas last year. I think last year I was just so jaded from talking about Christmas with my clients because it's a discussion point every year, right? People have things coming up. They don't know how to manage social occasions. They are fearful about gaining excess body weight across the Christmas period. And yeah, there is right for concern, right? Christmas time is a time of year where people are going out more to drink more alcohol than they usually do. They are eating or going to be environments where they're going to be able to eat way more calories than they usually would. They're going to be maybe surrounded by people that they love and maybe some people that they don't love as much, right? Some people don't have the best relationship with their families. For some people, it could be a very stressful time because of that reason. For some people, it could be very lonely time because they don't have much family. And then they're kind of dealing with all this alongside, some goals of wanting to manage body composition, maybe want to perform better. And I do think while Christmas can be a bit daunting for a lot of people from the perspective of their fitness goals, I think we can make it out to be a bit of a bigger deal than it actually is, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, Christmas is going to come up every single year for the rest of your life. So whether you like it or not, you're going to be faced with the exact same scenarios every single year. Obviously, sometimes in life that may get better. Maybe you find your significant other and you're able to get involved in their family, and maybe they make your kind of family scenarios around Christmas a little bit more palatable. Maybe it's a case that from even financial perspective, Christmas to Christmas is a little bit easier for you. It could be a case that Christmas to Christmas, you have your habits and your behaviors more aligned with something that's conducive towards managing your body composition, managing just generally how you go about Christmas. For some people, Christmas can be quite destructive because they can be engaged with maybe drinking way more alcohol than they otherwise would, and this kind of brings out, the Frank the Tank inside them. It's also a time where every single year people are going to gain a couple of kilos, and for a lot of people, they are not going to lose these kilos, right? And this, believe it or not, over time is really a big kind of point in the year where people are going to accumulate the body fat that's going to stick with them for the rest of their life. It may not seem like that, but having worked with hundreds of people to date, most people, right, have generally okay intakes of eating, right? I'm not saying food sources and food quality is perfect, but from a calorie perspective, generally okay, midweek. Then when it comes to the likes of the weekends, that's when they're putting on a little bit of weight and maybe not getting it off. But then we come to Christmas and you're essentially having a weekend turn into a 2 to 3 week period where your weekend behaviors turn into an everyday behavior for a couple of weeks. And then as well, alongside that, people, because it's colder, the weather's worse, and generally they are engaged in more social activities. They are engaged in less exercise. They're not going to the gym as much. They're seeing, what's the point? Sure, I'm being bold anyway by overeating, and, it's Christmas. And this can result in a couple of kilos fat gain coming to the new year. Maybe decide to do some type of crash diet to get it off. People crash diet, they gain the weight back inevitably. And then year after year, they might be up 1 to 2 to 3 kilos every single year, right? And there is some research kind of pointing towards this, that the weight that people gain across Christmas, they will struggle to lose. And then the next year that compounds, the following year after that compounds. And then before you know it, even though you're like, most times I'm eating quite healthily, I'm exercising, but you're never getting to the point where you're actually kind of losing the weight that you accumulate. And the weight that you accumulate across Christmas month, that can be very much offset by just engaging in a few important behaviors, which we're going to talk about here. Okay. So before we get into the actual podcast itself, one thing that does help the podcast grow is when people give me a rating and a review on the podcast platform you're listening on. Another thing that really does help it grow is word of mouth. So if you have enjoyed the podcast, tell a friend, tell a family member who may need to hear this one in particular and other ones. it does help when people share the podcast on their Instagram story. Just all these little kind of like word of mouth kind of or referral ways of kind of getting the podcast out probably help it more than really ratings and reviews. So I do really, really appreciate when people do that. Finally, before I get into the actual main topic, I do have some coaching spaces coming up into the new year. Well, actually, coaching spaces now available, right? It's not just coming up in the new year. I have coaching spaces available most of the time. Drop me a DM and we can have a chat and get you set up to work through the Christmas, right? Now, as you'll kind of get from this podcast, I'm not going to be getting people to work extremely hard towards a singular goal during the Christmas period, but it's actually not a bad time to start coaching because it's probably the time when people need the most support, right? If you're listening to this podcast, you're listening to it specifically for this Christmas content, you're probably the type of person who would probably benefit from getting some coaching across the Christmas month, if even just for having some type of structure in place, knowing how to tackle the Christmas like day, Stephen's Day, the nights out, have some accountability there. If you do feel as if like this can be a little bit more of a tangent time from an adherence point of view, but ultimately it's also a really good place to start building some habits and behaviors that you can carry forward into January, which if you're looking to start a fat loss phase in January, this essentially going to set the foundations and put in some groundwork now so that you have an easier transition to January. Big mistake that people make is they spend the back end of the year really, really relaxed on things like their fitness and like, going to the gym, building muscle, eating for performance, trying to have a generally high quality diet, and sleep. And once January rolls around, you start a fat loss phase, they feel overwhelmed and they just know, okay, right, the most effective thing for me to do right now here is just slash calories. But they slash calories on a shitty foundation. They slash calories on a diet that's already made up of a lot of ultra processed, highly palatable foods. They don't have any kind of structure to their diet. They don't know how many times they're eating it a day. They don't know when they're eating. They don't know what type of training program they're following. They don't know how many days a week they should be training. And people just end up throwing like the kitchen sink at it. Whereas when you set the foundations in place, maybe spend like 4 to 6 weeks just trying to build up a structure to your diet, like try to essentially kind of make a skeleton diet for yourself where you're picking protein sources, carbohydrate sources, fat sources, fruit, vegetable sources that work for you, spices and seasonings that you like, coming up with different meal ideas that you can use for your breakfast, lunch, dinner. Trying to formulate a pattern or routine around getting some exercise that's not gym related. So that could be like going out for steps, doing a bit of cardio, getting your gym program laid out, getting used to what it feels like to train hard, building up your competency there. Then you spend a few weeks doing that, right? Between now to Christmas, January, you go into the diet phase. You're just going to be able to get straight in there and start losing a lot of body fat while having it to be a relatively easy process because you put in the work to set the foundations. That's a really, really important part of the process. And it's something I do a lot with clients is I won't get them to follow a diet straight away. Like I won't get them to go straight into a deficit, especially if they're new to the process. If there's somebody who's coming in with already a number of years of experience, they're probably somebody and they've kind of proven that they have good levels of habits and behaviors. They're somebody I can put straight into a diet phase, into a gain phase or whatever. Somebody who has generally been inconsistent and that's their main kind of crux. They've been struggled with structure, they've struggled with adherence just over the long term, and they're kind of a blank slate. The foundation period is incredibly important. So if that's you, consider reaching out for coaching. All right, so coming up to Christmas, I think it's quite important, first and foremost, to just put it out there that how you decide to spend Christmas is completely your prerogative. Whatever way you want to spend Christmas, that is completely down to you. We are all adults here, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. I used to feel a little bit kind of guilty if throughout Christmas I wanted to do a bit more training, or I wanted to go out less, or I wanted to go out more. Really, it's down to how you want to spend it. And that can change from year to year depending on what's going on. So say, for example, next year is going to be just before I start my contest prep diet. Next year, I am likely to probably limit my social occasions more next year and probably be a little bit more militant with my diet through the Christmas period, like through like the Christmas Day and stuff like that, right? Because I know that I'm going to have to start a pretty hard diet and a pretty important diet once I enter contest prep in 2027. Now this year, it's slightly different, right? This year is slightly different. I'm a long way away from competing in bodybuilding until 2027. So this year, I'm going to allow myself to be a bit more relaxed too, right? Same way I was allowing myself to be more relaxed last year. Now, last year, I was in a position where my body fat was quite high. I was pretty balls deep into a gaining phase. So I was probably even a little bit more less structured, or how to say, a little bit more lenient with myself then. Whereas now, again, my kind of level of stringency towards my goal, or level of dedication, adherence, or whatever throughout the Christmas month, Christmas week really, right? Christmas is not a month, December is a month, but the Christmas period, right? I am, again, probably going to be a bit more limited on my social occasions relative to other years. I'm still going to allow myself to enjoy myself. But say, for example, around like the Christmas Day, Stephen's Day, and even just the amount of social engagements I go to is going to be a little bit less than previously, because I want to ensure that throughout this month, I don't have my rate of gain go up way too quickly relative to what it has other years. Other years, I just kind of accept that, yeah, okay, right, my weight's going to go up a little bit across Christmas month, whatever, I'll diet off eventually, because I have that in my toolkit, right? I can diet at a whim if I want to, and there's no issue to me, and I can keep it off if I wanted to. So this year, I am probably going to only have like one main social occasion, my school night out with my friends. That is something we do every single year since we've left school, because it's pretty important for us as we get older to stay in contact with each other and at least have one night out where a lot of us get together. So that's something I'm going to factor in. Going to be a meal out to Mexican restaurant. I'm probably going to go out that night and get pissed as well. But in terms of nights out across Christmas, for me, that's all there's going to be this year, right? Other years, there's been 4 events where I've been going out drinking and, just generally not being my fitness self. Christmas Day, I'm going to allow myself to enjoy a pretty good amount of food. Now, personally for me, I'm not the type of person to have my hand in a box of celebrations. I don't really like kind of that type of eating, like picking. I'm more the type of person, I just like to sit down and eat a fucking big meal. Like, I'll have 2 plates at Christmas dinner. I'll have 2 desserts at Christmas dinner. Like, I'll eat substantially at that meal. All right. And we're going to talk about, like, how we can manage all these things later on in the episode. But that's how I'm going to do it this year. Now, next year, probably not as much. I probably won't be as lenient. I'll probably have the Christmas dinner, but probably won't have 2 plates. Probably won't have two things of dessert. I'll still allow myself to be flexible. It's just a case of not being as flexible as now. And this all come back down to, you can enjoy Christmas whatever way you want to. You can decide that you're going to have more nights out. You can decide to have more Christmas dinners. You can decide to have your hands in this box of celebrations more than somebody else. However, each of those decisions that you make, you also have to accept that there's some consequence at the back end of it, right? If you decide that, okay, during Christmas, I'm going to allow there to be box of celebrations, heroes, and what's the other one? The box of biscuits, or Quality Street, right? I've never been a fan of Quality Street. But if you're the type of person who is like, yeah, I'm going to have those around the house, I'm going to eat myself sick with those on Christmas Day, you're entitled to do it. But just realize that there is consequences to it. And then especially when you put that alongside maybe the mince pies you have, a couple of plates of Christmas dinner, a couple of plates of fucking Christmas pudding you have, all the wine you drink or whatever like that, right? There's a consequence to it. It's not to say that it's bad, not to say it's good. You can do it whatever way you want, but at the back end of it, you can't be kind of annoyed if your weight goes up, right? So this is an important thing. So I will quite often say to my clients, right, when it does come to this period, we need to, first off, kind of ask ourselves, what do we want to get out of our Christmas period? How much enjoyment? What does enjoyment look like for us? What really kind of makes this period enjoyable? For me, it's obviously the food is a part of it, right? I love the Christmas dinner, especially Emma's mother's cooking. She makes amazing food, so I really, really like enjoying that. So I'll allow myself to have two plates of it. But ultimately, for me, like now the older I've gotten and the more I'm living abroad, like pretty much the last few years, I enjoy the most about being home for Christmas is being around other people and being around friends, being around family. As cheesy as it sounds and fucking as corny as it sounds, that's the kind of part of Christmas that makes the most for me, or makes it the most special for me. So it's not necessarily the case that, having a few fucking handful of celebrations is going to make it better for me. It's not that I restrict myself from it. I say I can't do it. I can absolutely do it, but that's not something that's going to add to my enjoyment of this actual Christmas event. All right. So you have to decide what way you like to enjoy your Christmas and what that looks like for you, how many days you want to be like, your loosest self. And if you are somebody who wants to be a little bit more regimented towards a particular goal, don't feel that you can't do it either through this period, right? I think it's something that people who are more in the bodybuilding, powerlifting sphere can struggle around this time, is if they do have something in close proximity to the Christmas event, maybe your post show or something like that, and you're trying to be a little bit more kind of rigid because you want to kind of make to make the transition from your post show that little bit easier, and you don't want to like gorge on food, and you're getting yourself to be a little bit more kind of restrained, just because you know that the adherence towards your kind of post show plan is still quite important. And you could have people say, "I would not just relax and let your hair down and just enjoy it. It's Christmas." But you just need to be very upfront to them to say, like, I understand, like, that's maybe what enjoyment looks like for you, but this is what I feel is the most important for me to do right now. This is not something I'm going to be doing forever, but maybe this thing that I'm doing right now, this is important to me. That could be, again, you're coming out post-show, could be that you have a competition in the next few weeks after Christmas. Maybe you're working towards a big PB that you're going to hit before the year is out, right? Just be very upfront with people if they do kind of have that, like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Because most people's families and some friends won't understand if you are very much into like the kind of, if you're very fitness driven, right? If you're very into like body composition change, strength development, some things we do look weird because a lot of people, let's be frank, find the whole idea of being disciplined and being regimented alien. Okay, so you just need to be upfront with them and tell them that what you're doing right now is important to you, and this is you kind of enjoying your own Christmas in your own unique way. Because again, we're not all going to enjoy it in the same way. So I think that's first and foremost the most important thing to take on board when it does come to managing Christmas or coming up to Christmas. What do you want out of Christmas? How do you want to enjoy it? And then around that, let's now talk about what it looks like outside of those. Okay, because the social occasions, I do think, and the Christmas day, right? They're going to be limited. There's many other days within the actual month of December itself, and even now we're in November. There's so many days leading up to Christmas, and I think one of the most important things for you to keep in mind is that it's not Christmas yet, and those events have not happened yet, right? Do not accept defeat this early in this far away from the end of the year. There is still 6 weeks left of 2025, maybe 5 weeks. But within those, right, we say, okay, you're a bit of a social bunny. You have 3 to 4 actual like non-family related social engagements, and then you have your Christmas Day, your Stephen's Day potentially, and then you maybe have a New Year's Eve. So within that, we're talking about there's about 7 occasions that you're maybe looking to be a bit more, kind of looser, socially interactive across the next couple of weeks, which is a lot to manage. So what do you do during these events? In my opinion, you need to pick and choose which is more important to be a little bit looser with, and which is something that you can be a little bit more reserved with. Again, what out of all these activities or engagements is going to make that process enjoyable? Is drinking like a ton of alcohol going to make it that much more enjoyable? Or are some of the occasions ones that you go to and you can have just a couple of drinks versus getting absolutely slaughtered, right? Are there any of those occasions where you could maybe have, just a regular normal meal and still pick like something off the menu if one of those kind of engagements is like a meal at a restaurant? Maybe it's a work night out, right? A work night out, you're going to some fucking like one of these things that like big groups of work parties go to. Like I remember I went to one in the Radisson when I was working with Best Menswear, right? They had like some entertainment on, they had a 3-course meal or something like that, and you'd sit around the table, all your work colleagues. Okay, something like that. Depending on how you get on with your work colleagues, is that something that you really need to like spend the whole night at getting absolutely fucked? Probably not. That's probably the thing you can probably get away with going to for a few hours, have the food, not drink, go home, get into bed early, and boom, you've went through that social occasion pretty well. Then you might have, again, like the night out with the lads, like I'm having, where, I'm committed to that night to just going out, enjoying myself with my mates, not being too concerned about the ins and outs of, how much I drink or anything like that, and just being able to get back up the next day follow my usual hangover protocol, and then the following day back to the gym and back into my routine. So you have to decide within all those engagements which ones you're going to prioritize and which ones you're not, okay? Because there's definitely going to be ones where you can decide that I am not going to go full bore and full fucking Frank the Tank mode, and other ones where you can just say, hey, I'm just going to show up, show my face, go home, and get up the next day and, kind of keep on trucking along with my fitness goals, right? And this kind of comes into, we're prioritizing what we want to prioritize, the social engagements, the things that are most important to us within our life, and then we're the other ones that are not as important, but the things that we still should be showing our face with, that we show up to those too. Then around that, we say, okay, right, so we have those occasions that are coming up. We decided which ones we want to be a little bit more kind of leaning into in regards to enjoyment, and ones we kind of show up to. Outside that, okay, how many other days have you got in a month? Heaps, right? You got heaps more days. You've got over 20 something days left in a 30-day period, right? Over 30-day period between now to the end of the year. So that's many opportunities for you to still put your best foot forward and work towards your goals, right? You can, on those days, still track your nutrition. You can still ensure you're adhering to your training program. You still ensure that you are going to bed on time, yada, 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 right? Following your usual routine, okay? So we're not accepting defeat just yet. The occasions haven't happened. We can still make as much headway towards our goals until those occasions pop up. And then once those occasions pop up, we're going to talk about how we can 100% manage them. I obviously mentioned there in regards to prioritizing events, which the prioritizing is a big factor in it, because if we just try to employ a kind of typical night out regime or, approach the food at every single interval, it might be very hard for us to manage. Now, one thing I'm getting a lot of my clients to do during the Christmas period is I am going to get them to go into maintenance. And the reason for this being is that the majority of our time, the majority of our life, we are really going to be sitting around maintenance, right? We need to be thinking about maintenance behaviors. So many people get so bogged down in what they need to do to lose weight, what they need to do to gain weight, whereas most people suck at staying the exact same. And as a result of always focus on an outcome, the outcome being the scales, outcome being them getting leaner, they kind of lose a little bit of the whole point of it, right? Like ultimately people want to kind of get in shape, or people want to gain muscle so they can get to a position really to be like happy. Like that's most people, right? They be happy with their physique and happy to look. But then once they get there, they forget the things that got them there, right? They forget to continue to engage in behaviors that are allowing them to kind of stay in shape, right? So for example, if you're in a diet phase, coming out of a diet phase and into maintenance during the Christmas period can be a really, really helpful way for you to ensure that after the fat loss period is done, that you're able to keep the results. Because what will happen is you'll continue to be looking at tracking your food, but with a higher calorie allotment. You might decide, okay, versus hitting very specific and very rigid calorie targets, that now I'll give myself flexible ranges to work within. Maybe I'll give myself like a calorie ceiling and a calorie floor, and within that I'll give myself a protein minimum to hit, I'll give myself a fiber minimum to hit, and give myself a number amount of meals to hit per day. And if you employ something like that across Christmas, it would work really well to start kind of getting you towards thinking about the behaviors that are really going to drive like maintenance of a physique over a longer period of time, and things that are going to be useful for you to do once the diet finishes. Because they're things that I will quite often push onto my clients during times like Christmas and during times like maintenance. Well, I'm not saying that we need to hit a perfect calorie target. We're going to go to a range. I'm going to give you minimums for protein. So minimum protein target is usually about 1.6 grams per kilogram body weight. I'll give them a minimum fiber target of like 25 to 30. And then outside of that, we're going to keep on with the likes of our general training, right? Because training is something that regardless of whether your diet, gaining phase, maintenance phase, we're going to keep that up, because training is really important for both longevity, but also for developing the most amount of muscle mass you ever will across a period of time, right? Muscle mass and strength. Training is not something that we want to let off ever. We still want to keep up some general activity outside of the gym. So I might say, okay, let's try to aim for, minimum about 6,000 steps per day. And that's your minimum. If you decide to do more, so be it, right? Obviously, the kind of minimum target is there based off what the person's already doing versus that being a blanket statement, which I do like to do. I prefer to give people step targets based off what they typically do, habitually do, versus say, okay, everybody does 10,000 or everybody does 7,000, right? It's always based off where the current baseline is, and we kind of set a minimum or a maximum based off that. Now, if you were to go through the Christmas period with just having a few of those kind of minimum standards or maintenance behaviors, and again, you can paint into that as well, like, having just a fixed amount of meals per day or a range of meals. You say, I'm going to have maybe 3 meals and a snack, or 4 meals as like your kind of frequency of eating throughout the Christmas period. That could be enough. That could be enough for you to maintain your weight throughout the Christmas period. Feel as if you've been able to be flexible and enjoy the foods that you're taking in, while still paying attention to things that are going to ultimately maintain the likes of the physique you've developed across the year, right? Because if you're having like a calorie window, that's meaning then on some days, like the days where you might not want to eat as much because you're too stuffed from the day before, you have a calorie floor that you can aim for. Yeah, on the days that you want to be a little bit more flexible, you have a ceiling you can aim for. However, within that, you're also given some direction towards the likes of sources. With the likes of protein, if you're given the protein minimum, okay, we know that we're having a sufficient amount of protein here to continue sustaining the level of muscle mass that you've built, but also having a decent amount of protein kind of filtered within the diet, spread across these meals. So again, 1.6 grams per kilogram body weight. That could be about 0.4 grams per kilogram of body weight per meal. If you're having 4 meals across the day, that's ensuring that at least at each meal you're having a source of, you're having a food source in there that's going to probably help you to manage your appetite. Okay, which is important around the Christmas period, because a lot of people find that they can continue to overeat more and more and more if they're just having foods that are rich in carbohydrates and fat. But then alongside that, we're saying, okay, let's have a fiber minimum. So we're having a protein and fiber minimum in here as two things that are helping us to manage both muscle mass from the protein point of view. It's also helping appetite regulation. And then you also have the likes of the fiber, which is also helping appetite regulation as well as blood sugar control, because a lot of people have foods that are too rich in sugar and fat. Foods are really hyperpalatable, but if they're also kind of adding in some type of fiber sources throughout the day, focusing on fruit and vegetables, they're getting a lot of micronutrients in too. So they're not just eating a lot of shitty food, but enjoyable food nonetheless. But they're also putting in foods that are going to help them sustain energy and not have like too many kind of like peaks and troughs to the likes of the energy throughout the day. Then with likes of structure, they're at least allowing themselves to then kind of keep some semblance of balance and normality, which they'd have in regular times. Because a lot of people during midweek, they have structure and they have routine because their work demands it, and they have to have their breakfast at a certain time, their lunch at a certain time, their dinner at a certain time. But then when it comes to the Christmas holidays and they're off, all hell breaks loose. They're not having breakfast anymore. Like they're not following a usual kind of food routine. And when people don't have this like usual food routine going on, they end up missing meals that their body thinks they're going to get, and then they come up to a certain period of the day and they get ravenously hungry. When they're ravenously hungry, they start to make poor food decisions that are probably going to be laden towards calorie dense, hyperpalatable, fat, salty foods that are very prominent or very accessible in the environment, because we're getting all these things stocked up for our Christmas week. So if we're able to keep at least to our kind of structure of 3 to 4 meals across the day, we're going to be in a much better place to manage the likes of our energy intake overall through the Christmas period, while still, again, having that bit of flexibility in there. Because I haven't given you carb targets, haven't given you fat targets. I've said, hey, meet the calorie floor to the calorie ceiling, hit minimum protein, hit minimum fiber, have a structure to your overall amount of meals per day, and after that, cool, right? Because again, what we're thinking about here is maintenance. We're not thinking about losing fat or gaining muscle. We're just thinking about what type of food behaviors could you do long term, right? And I think for most people, if they're given that type of level of structure or given those type of behaviors, that would be the type of thing that they'd be able to sustain over long term. Sounds pretty sustainable to me. What about you? So that's something I'm going to get a lot of people to think about, right? From the nutrition point of view, if we're not able to work towards a specific goal, whether that's fat loss phase or gaining phase, should still be able to happen realistically. But a fat loss phase probably isn't a good idea to be kind of working towards in the month of December, because again, you've got too much on. Let's practice maintenance, and if we can do that, you're going to be in a much better position coming out the back end of the year. You'll feel more refreshed then to continue on your fat loss phase once January rolls around, and you'll also feel as if you're a lot more set up for maintenance once that period comes around. and feel a lot more confident in that approach, because you'll have seen the proof is in the pudding, and have seen as well how you've been able to manage social occasions and social interactions alongside using that type of approach. And the next thing we're going to talk about is training across the Christmas period. So for the most part, training can remain pretty static. I don't think we should be aiming to enter into an extremely important block of training right now if you are looking to aim towards a specific milestone lift. Ideally, if you're working towards a milestone lift, that should be hit before any of your social occasions take place, because the social occasions, let's face it, if you're having a few drinks and you're looking to achieve a big performance goal the week after, it's probably unlikely to happen. So I would definitely advise you, if you are working towards a big performance goal and a big milestone lift or something, like one of my clients, Emmett, right now, he's working towards a 140 kilo bench, going to meet up with him across Christmas, and we're going to get him to test his 100 max just before Christmas. I have some clients who are going to be competing as well at the start of the month down in Limerick, and they are working towards competing in that competition, of course, at this like mid-December. But for the Christmas weeks, right, nobody that I'm working with is really going to be kind of being pushed towards, okay, we need to do some of your hardest pieces of training just yet, right? Because I understand that, again, other things are taking priority during this time period. Kind of similar to what I talked about there in regards to the nutrition, having a bit more of a kind of maintenance approach during the Christmas period. We could take that approach to life for training. Now, this is not to say that I'm telling clients, and I'm definitely not doing this myself, is to say, okay, during the Christmas period, let's go down to maintenance level of volume. No, we're still going to adhere to the training program, but most people that I'm programmed for and coaching at the moment, they're going to be into like a volume block or a more kind of hypertrophy block, right? They're going to be more so working towards just kind of going into those sessions, rushing them, and if there's extra calories there to put to use, we'll put them to use, right? But there's generally more of a kind of process oriented outlook to like the training across the Christmas period, and it to be something that's kind of keeping them sane, keeping some level of routine in across the Christmas period. I don't think it's a good idea during the Christmas period to just give up on training altogether. Well, number one, obviously, like just even from a fucking calorie point of view, if you're going to be sitting around eating a lot more food, just deciding across this period to just like abstain from exercise altogether, probably not a great idea. But then as well, even just from a becoming detrained point of view, not a good idea, right? Because like it doesn't take a lot to become detrained. If you take like a full 2 weeks off training across Christmas, you are going to feel incredibly weak by the time you get back. And that is not a good place to be in, right? Because you're going to, number one, be so excited to get back into the gym that you're just going to want to go in that first week and absolutely crush it. And you're also going to be really motivated because you probably put on a little bit of size around the midsection. And what's going to happen that first week? Back to the gym. Okay, you go back to, you crush yourself in the gym. You're really detrained. And you're going to notice, wow, I've got a lot weaker here, right? Because skill is going to have degraded from all the lifts that you would have been doing in the gym. Even like low level skill activities like how a leg press feels, never mind how a fucking squat feels. You're going to go to the gym, you're going to feel crushed, and you definitely increase the risk of injury just in that time period there. Whereas you stay consistent across Christmas, even if you're not like having any like fucking like amazing standout sessions where nothing like majorly important is happening, you're still adding and contributing to the overall goal of gaining more muscle over time, right? Like gaining muscle over time, and this is what I try to kind of get everybody to think about, is like it is a multi-year project, right? And like every week that you're dedicating towards that counts, whether that is a week of things being perfectly aligned outside the gym or not. You going in there having like putting your best effort into a session is super important. Like, geez, even bad sessions. Yesterday is in the gym having an absolute stinker of a leg session. It was the fucking worst leg session I've had in a long time. Type of session where you want to leave after every single exercise, but I kind of finished that and I said, you know what, at the end of the day, that's going to contribute still towards my goal at the end of the day. So these periods across Christmas, it's still that same way. Now, important thing to do, however, is don't, and this is like one of the reasons why people stop training across Christmas, is they can't stick to their usual routine. They can't train chest on a Monday, they can't train arms on a fucking Friday or whatever, okay? During Christmas, you have to accept that things are not going to be perfect. Things are not going to be perfect nutritionally. Things are not going to be perfect on the training side of things, okay? You're going to have to deviate from your routine. You're going to be doing things with family. You're going to be doing things with friends. You're going to be doing things tired. You're going to be doing things potentially sometimes hungover. That's okay. Training is no different. So with training, what I generally do across the Christmas period is I will train when I can, and I'll say this to clients too: train when you can, but when you can't, even if it's on like if that day where you can't train is the usual training day, just move your training day forward. Right? It's not a big deal. It really does not matter. Your body doesn't really know, and like your training cycle doesn't have to adhere to a 7-day calendar. The Gregorian calendar has no bearing on your training schedule, really. Okay. The way I think about it, if I have to extend my training block by training week by day, is I'm getting to do that session now with a little bit more rest. That's like my optimistic mindset to it. Versus, I need to shift my training week a day forward. Now my next week is ruined. My schedule is off. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay, so just shift that rest day forward. Like even if you have up to 2 days off the gym when you maybe wouldn't usually have that, that's completely fine. Just get back to your usual session. And what I generally recommend to clients here is like, okay, I know that people have the routine and they want to stick to it. Like in an ideal sense, right? Monday through Sunday, normal month. All right, you'll have all your training days to align on the same days every single week, right? Because it just makes things easy and it makes things predictable for people. But during the Christmas period, generally says, okay, if you usually do day 1, day 2, then you have a rest day, you do day 3, day 4. You have 2 rest days after that, right? So that's like Monday day 1, Tuesday day 2, Wednesday day 3, or Wednesday off, day 3, Thursday, so on. If you need to do it, so it goes Monday day 1, Tuesday off, day 2, Wednesday off, day 3, Friday off, day 4, Sunday. Okay, again, you're just doing those sessions with an extra rest day. But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't skip sessions, because that's what people do. They'll say, okay, well, I couldn't train on my day 3, so I'd have off, so I'm just going to go straight to day 4. No, complete all days in your training cycle, because when I write a training program, I'm putting that training program down with in mind that person at the end of the training cycle is going to have completed X amount of leg days, X amount of push days, X amount of pull days, X amount of upper body days, X amount of lower body days, whatever. And all the volume across the training program counts. So if we end up skipping days, then we're missing out on some of the volume that's programmed specifically for that person, for their goals. So keep that in mind when you're going through the Christmas period. If you need to take an extra rest day, do shift your day for the training day, whatever. But ensure you're completing all the training days. They just might be in slightly different order. Now, one thing that is also going to be useful is it could be worthwhile if you are coming up to a deload around Christmas week. You could also just extend your deload, right? And this is like for people who maybe have a little bit more social engagements or responsibilities than others. So people who maybe have a family, right? So if you have a family and you need to spend more time with the likes of the kids and stuff like that, yeah, maybe could be a good idea to, okay, let's between now to maybe the second week or so in December, let's really start to ramp up your training intensity. You could even go into a little bit of a volume accumulation kind of period where you're looking to say, okay, I'm going to do an extra set per muscle group per week this week, or like an extra set per exercise every day this week. Okay, I'm going to do the exact same next week and the exact same week in the third week, and that's going to be 3 weeks essentially of volume accumulation. You'll absolutely want and feel like you need a deload after that. But again, just theoretical ideas here. It's not like an actual prescription of what to do, but again, you do it if you want. And then coming up to the likes of your Christmas period, okay, let's have a 2-week deload here. We'll massively reduce the amount of training frequency. So if you're usually used to doing 4 days of training, we'll do 2 on each week. So that means you're just doing 4 training sessions across a 2-week period. And it's just a way for you to not have to think about getting into a gym during the Christmas period, right? You've essentially kind of completed as much work as you really need to up to the Christmas period, but you're also saying, okay, training at the moment is not as important. I'm still going to be able to get in maintenance level of training because you're going in to do a bit of a deload sessions twice per week. And then through the Christmas period, okay, you still have gotten in some training sessions, so you're not completely detrained when you come into January, but you've been able to give yourself that little bit more space to spend time with family. So that's one way you could do it. Now, the deload that you'd actually do during that 2-week period, it doesn't even have to be that you do like, massively reduced load or massively reduced sets. It could just be a case saying, okay, I'm going to go back to the amount of volume that I was doing before I started volume accumulation, right? So if you start your volume accumulation this week and you add a set to every exercise, you will just do your regular amount of volume on that two-week deload. You'll do your 2 sessions with regular volume. So you might do an upper session, a lower body session, and then week 2, upper body session, lower body session, which is your regular volume. But you've deloaded through number 1, you've dropped all the sets that you accumulated up to, but you've also dropped the amount of training volume from taking off 2 of your other training days. So hopefully that kind of makes sense in regards to just another approach that you can take. And then also, of course, if you are coming up to an end of a training cycle and you don't want to start into a new one, okay, you could just extend out your training cycle, right? So this is important for maybe people who are doing more kind of like strength blocks, for example. Like, maybe starting off starting off a new block during Christmas period might not necessarily set you up for the best success, but you could just extend out the current one you're doing. Maybe what you decide to do, say for example, if you're doing a regular powerlifting block and you're getting up towards your week 4 training block, and that's usually when you kind of finish the training block, but you have your 2-week period here now of Christmas that is on the way, and you have lots of social occasions coming up. What you can decide to do is you can decide, okay, during this 2-week period here, versus going into my next training block, deloading and then going into my next training block, what I'll do is I'll extend out the training block, but I'll start to reduce down my accessories. By reducing down the accessories, maybe kind of into that like week 5 when your block is typically 4 weeks. So what you'll start to do is you start to deload. So you start to drop off some training fatigue, so you can potentially continue to push some of the intensities into week 5, and then week 6 maybe may start to drop off the back offs. Again, that's reducing the total amount of time you're spending in the gym now during Christmas week, so you can spend more time with friends and family, and you just go in and kind of work up towards something that's going to be challenging and kind of leave it there for that training block. Following week, first week of January, deload, and then start your new training block. Deload properly, or do a pivot week and then start your new training block in January. So that's just another way that you can do it. But yeah, if you're training like a bodybuilder and you're just doing your regular training weeks, again, just extend the training block. If you want to deload, if it's the right time for a deload, you can also factor in the deload there too. Okay, I'll give you plenty of ideas there as how you can manage the likes of your training around Christmas. And the final point that I'll give you on the training side of things is, if for whatever reason you can't get to the gym, maybe you're reliant on a car, you don't have access to the car, maybe it decides to snow like fuck this Christmas and you can't get outside, you can't get to the gym. Home workouts, we all remember those from COVID, can be a viable option. And there are things I have done in the past, right? Like I remember when I was probably in my early 20s, I didn't have a car. And I still wanted to get to the gym. I still wanted to train. So I would just devise home workouts, right? Now, I'm not going to go through a list of different home exercises you can do right here and go through like set and rep prescriptions. But I do actually have a Google folder with loads of home workouts in it. So if you want a list of home exercises or home workouts that you can do during the Christmas period, if you can't get to the gym, just send me a DM on Instagram and I'll send them over to you, okay? All right, so to recap everything we went through so far, we went through why we shouldn't accept defeat just yet and how we could just continue to model on, follow our plan up to Christmas events starting. Once those start, we probably want to have an idea as to which ones we're prioritizing over one another and which ones are going to go a bit more frank to tank with, which ones we are going to be a little bit more reserved with, just show the face. We need to decide with our training what we're going to do with it. Are we going to extend our training block? Are we in a position where we are going to need to take a deload, be the smartest option? Is it a case that we just continue on to training that we're currently doing and just extend the days of the training week that we're doing and just not be too fussed if we're having extra rest days filter in? But the next thing we need to talk about is how we can specifically manage our nutrition through the Christmas day and how we are going to go about alcohol intake, right? Because these are probably the two biggest kind of points of confusion, I think, for some people, right? So it really depends on your context, like where you are within your journey during Christmas week, right? So if you're somebody who is balls deep into a gaining phase right now, I don't actually think that you are going to have as much of an issue during Christmas as somebody who's fresh out of diet phase, right? Or somebody who's in the middle of diet phase. So somebody who's like balls deep into a gaining phase, and I've been there myself, you just don't have as much of an appetite. So you don't really think about like picking fat foods as much. You typically reach fullness a lot quicker than other people. Whereas somebody who is fresh out of diet phase, I've been at both ends of the spectrum. I literally finished a nearly 40-week contest prep period just before Christmas, and I've also been 100 kilos, fucking like 25% body fat around Christmas too. And I can tell you, the Christmas where I probably struggled the most with eating more was the one where I just finished contest prep, naturally enough, because my body was still fucking starving and wanted to consume more food. So a bit of both ends of the spectrum. So depending on how dialed in you want to be during the Christmas week, one of the first, I guess, more kind of dialed in and more measured things you could do if you wanted to, right? There's not something I'm doing, not something I get my clients to do, but it is something you can do, is thinking about calorie redistribution, okay? So calorie redistribution essentially is throughout the entire week, we have a certain number of calories that we can take in to either gain weight, lose weight, or maintain weight, right? So this essentially is our energy balance. Because like when we set our calorie goal, so say for example, you're having like 2,000 calories per day, you estimating weight gain, weight maintenance, or weight loss of that is not done on a day basis, right? It's done across a weekly basis. So we could say, okay, if you're having 2,000 calories a day, you have 14,000 calories a week. Okay, so calorie redistribution would just say, okay, that means our 14,000 calorie allotment is how much we need to maintain or gain or lose weight. So we're having 2,000 calories a day. It just makes things very simple. Now, if you have an event coming up like Christmas and you want to have a bigger allotment on that day to ensure that you're kind of offsetting any of the extra calories you're going to eat, and you do this across any of the periods or any of the kind of events you do have across Christmas, ideally they're spaced, like, you have a kind of week between them or so, is do some calorie redistribution, or calorie banking is another word for this, right? So if you have Christmas Day coming up and you're like, oh, I know I'm going to eat a lot that day, I want to eat a lot that day, but at the same time I don't want to have too much of a negative impact to my body composition, and you know what, the calories you're eating right now are pretty sufficient, so I don't mind kind of taking away a little bit of calories from every other day and tacking them onto that Christmas Day, okay? So this essentially is creating a calorie buffer. So to go back to our 2,000 calorie a day example, 14,000 calories at the end of the week. So you can say, okay, Christmas is, I know it's on a Thursday this year, but let's say for the sake of ease here, Christmas is on a Saturday. You are going to take from Monday to Friday, you're going to take 10% of your calorie intake. So I give 10% because 10% is a decent amount to save, but it's not something you're really going to feel. Like most people could make a 10% reduction to their calorie intake today without feeling any negative impacts. Like they won't feel like majorly hungry. They'll just have a slightly different, like slightly smaller portion size each of their meals, which won't be a big deal. So you can say, okay, I'm going to take off 200 calories of that 2,000 that I'm having a day. So that's 200 calories saved up from Monday to Friday. So that's 1,000 extra calories. They put that onto their Saturday. So now they've got 3,000 calories they can have on the Saturday. All right. Now, if you were also having Stephen's Day, well, what you could do is you just say, okay, I have 2,500 calories here on Saturday, 2,500 calories on Sunday. Both of those scenarios, whether you're having 2,000 calories from across 7 days, you're having 6 days at 1,800 and 1 day at 3,000, or 5 days 1,800 and 2 days at 2,500, they're both going to equate to the same amount of calories, right? Now, that's from a purely energetic perspective and a theoretical perspective of how you could essentially kind of maintain your weight through that week, okay, if you wanted to be very stringent with it. Now, it does not say that we're going to track on Christmas Day, and I'm going to go through that in a second, but it is more so that you're just being accountable for it and being accountable for the extra food that you may eat. Again, this is not something I'm going to do. It's not something I'm telling my clients to do, but it is something you can do, and it would be something that would work. Even when I'm using this with clients and preparing for a night out at the weekend, I am first and foremost kind of saying to them, I don't want you to save up too much towards the end of the week, because like saving up too many calories or having too much of a bank, it can encourage like almost like binge like eating, or like almost over like gluttonous type like eating events, which is generally not something that we want to be kind of engaging in, because a lot of people, when they do kind of eat themselves past the point of discomfort, they do end up feeling guilty, whether that's productive or not, and it's just not something that we want to encourage. But also with that, I'm also thinking day to day, that person is going to be going to the gym and training, right? If we have multiple days across the week now, and we're doing this very frequently, so say for example, if during the Christmas period, you could use this method every week if you wanted to. But if you're doing it and going way beyond the 10%, right? Say for example, you're saying, okay, I'm going to save 20% of my calorie intake from Monday through Friday. Okay, now you have a 20% debt that you're taking away that could have been contributed towards your training, right? That extra 10% that you're taking off, you'll absolutely feel that. Okay, so today if I was eating, I'm eating 4,000 calories. So if I went down to 3,200 calories, I definitely feel it. And I guarantee you'll feel it if you are like somebody who's maybe on a lower calorie intake too. So that could be taken away from your training performance. Take away from your training performance for the entire month of December. Going to not have potentially made as much kind of progress in the gym as you'd like to. You may not enjoy the process of being in the gym as much as you'd like to. So it's a very important caveat there. We want to take as much as we can to give ourselves a nice little buffer that we don't have to stress on the day of the occasion that we're saving for. So this context could be Christmas, could be Stephen's Day, could be another day. But we don't want to take so much that it's going to encourage like super compensation like behavior. We're overeating to a gluttonous point of view. We're starving. We're having massive energy dips throughout the day. We're ended up having a negative impacts to our training performance. Okay. So again, it's really important to kind of use this type of method with care and use it with common sense. Christmas. Now, on Christmas Day itself, what I am generally going to recommend my clients do, what I recommend you do yourself, what I recommend myself do, is enjoy it, okay? I would not be fretting on how I can plug this into my fitness pal, okay? Because you're going to wreck your head over it on a day where we're meant to be more so not just enjoying the food, but enjoying the time with our family, enjoying the time with our friends. And it's one day, right? If you have done everything that we've talked about so far in this podcast, right? If you have prioritized which nights out that you want to enjoy more, which ones you want to enjoy less, or days you want to go a little bit harder on, days you want to, and there's occasions where you're going a little bit more reserved, you are being on plan when you can, just following your usual routine every day outside of these events. You're keeping on top of your training, you're practicing these maintenance-like behaviors. The impact of one day where you are not thinking about calories, macros, or whatever, it won't matter, okay? Again, I have enjoyed every single Christmas I've had to date, and it's had no negative impacts to my own personal process because everything outside of that day has been managed to a degree, right? So I'm talking about this from a point of experience. Now, if you do want to be a little bit more kind of methodical, regimented, whatever way you want to put it, there are certain things you can do, okay? So for most of us, Christmas, we're going to be able to self-serve our plate, okay? Whether you're making it for yourself, right, with the family, your wife, the kids, whether you are having it with your parents and your mother or father are serving it to you, or whatever, or you're going to even you're going to a restaurant for it, you're going to like a carvery or something for it. I know some people do that on Christmas Day. We have the ability to self-serve and get what we want versus just take everything that is there to offer, right? Or just be given what there is to offer. So this is the first thing that we need to consider. When you're having your Christmas dinner, pick the things that you want, okay? And pick the portions of the things that you want too, okay? If there are items on the Christmas menu or the Christmas buffet, whatever you're having, that you don't like, don't take them for the sake of pleasing somebody else. Just take the things that you truly want to have. Now, after you consider this, and you're self-serving it, right? So you're able to give yourself the amount of portion size that you think is going to be most appropriate for you, your goals, and your appetite, and your just desire on that day. Things that I advise you start building your plate with first are going to be the protein and vegetables. So what I recommend you do is aim for at least half your plate to be whatever veg there is on offer, okay? So green veg, it's typically going to be least calorie dense, especially if it's steamed. You have the likes of Brussels sprouts. You can have the likes of root vegetables like carrots, parsnips, which will contain a little bit more. And obviously be aware that like some of the vegetables that you are getting prepared for you on Christmas Day, they might be cooked differently. They might be cooked in a lot of oil, a lot of butter. Emma's mother, she cooks carrots, right, in maple syrup and butter. They're fucking amazing. It may as well be sweets. They're so fucking good. But say for example, something like that, I'm enjoying, but I'm trying to be cautious of the amount that I'm using because they're the type of things I'm like, this may as well just be chips. Keep that in mind, right? So build protein and veg first in your plate. So get about half a plate of vegetables there. Okay, so again, this is kind of paying attention to fiber intake, paying attention to something like micronutrition. It's also kind of adding a little bit more kind of fullness to the meal, right? So it's going to add a bit more volume onto the plate, going to help reduce the amount of food you eat in totality, which I'm not saying that you have to reduce the amount of food you eat in totality, but in a context of a day where it's very easy to consume probably twice the triple amount of calories that you usually eat, it's probably not a bad idea to at least have a little bit of a break there, right? Green veg, root veg, fill the plate up with that. Again, get about half your plate filled with that to just over 3/4, and you're good, okay? And you can also vary this to the stage of your journey you're in. If you're in a gain phase right now, yeah, maybe go 1/4 of the plate. If you're in a dieting phase, you're in a maintenance phase, maybe go half the plate of vegetables, okay? Then after that, we want to fill the plate with our proteins, okay? So if you are having turkey, the white meat is generally the leanest, it's the least calorie dense, versus the darker meat, so likes of the legs, the thighs, which is typically the nicest. I love the dark meat. It is honestly the best. But, if you're looking to be a little bit more calorie conscious, if you're looking to, again, maintain your physique more so through this Christmas period, yeah, probably aim for more leaner meats. So again, the white turkey meat, like I don't know if people have chicken for Christmas, hopefully not. I know some people have steak. But I'm just going to limit it to talk about turkey and ham here, okay? Otherwise, we'll get too convoluted. So, white turkey meat, down with the likes of the ham. Ham, for the most part, is quite lean too. Of course, you might find that some ham might have more kind of fat rinds around it. Again, you just cut that off. Unless you're the type of person who really likes your fat, and then you just need to kind of factor in that, okay, I'm eating a little bit more fat today than usual, and so be it, right? But again, if you're somebody who is maybe trying to maintain your physique and trying to kind of have this to be a bridge between your diet phase, maybe you will try to abstain for having too much added fat or too much visible fat being put on your plate and eaten, okay? With the protein, okay, let's ensure that about 1/4 of our plate is going to be filled up with our protein source. So we have around 1/4 to a half filled with our lovely vegetables, and we have about 1/4 of our plate made up by about our protein. And now with the rest of the plate, we can just fill that up with the things that we want, right? So that could be your sheer puddings, it could be the likes of your mash, your roasties, or whatever. And of course, paying attention to what type of foods here are going to suit your best depending on what type of phase you're in. So obviously the more calories you're taking in overall, the more you're pushing towards gaining body weight. You might have a bit more roast potatoes or whatever like that. But if you're somebody who wants to enjoy your Christmas dinner but still have a bit of a bridge between the likes of your diet phase and this to be more of a kind of maintenance period, yeah, maybe say, okay, I'm going to have a mixture of my mash, I'm going to have a mixture of my roast. Maybe if there's any baked potatoes or steamed potatoes an option, that could also be an option there, just so that you are not having as much kind of oil and fats and butter and stuff like that coming into the mix. But again, it comes down to what you want to have on this day, right? Again, being conscious of enjoying today the way you want to, because again, this day is going to be very much a blip in the sea consistency which you put towards your goals across the last year. And another thing that we could probably bake into our Christmas Day approach, which is absolutely going to help you from a digestion point of view and from managing these large quantities of food, is getting out after every meal for a 10 to 15 minute stroll, right? A lot of times people feel really crap on Christmas Day because they spend the entire day just sitting around eating lots of food, picking away at snacks and doing no movement, right? Now, most people realize that when they don't do these behaviors, they feel very good, right? When they're not sitting around all day, they feel better. When they are not eating large quantities of food, they feel a little bit better, right? Obviously, you're going to still be eating large quantities of food because you're going to enjoy your big Christmas dinner. And even if you do decide you're going to have the more kind of healthy fry or midday snack, you probably still want to get in a little bit of activity. So going outside, again, 10, 15 minute walk after each meal, it's just helping you to kind of keep somewhat on top of your step count so that you're kind of offsetting some of the activity. I'm not saying that you go out and do fucking a 10k walk or anything like that. It's just, hey, let's keep up some daily movement and then spend the rest of your day sitting down watching Harry Potter, and enjoy your Christmas Day wherever you want. But if you do 30 minutes, 45 minutes of walking on Christmas Day, that's only going to contribute towards you maybe getting a little bit more enjoyment out of your food, having some more room for the food too, and generally feel a little bit better because you've gotten inside into the fresh air. And tying back into what I talked about very earlier on at the start of the podcast, let's talk about maintenance behaviors. This is another maintenance behavior we can keep in, right? Even on Christmas Day, despite spending it with friends and family, we can still have a maintenance level of activity on that day, right? The day is a day, yes, where we are going to be, being a bit more relaxed, but there is no harm for getting out for a bit of movement, even though it is Christmas Day. And again, completely optional, but if you're somebody who is a bit more kind of keen to kind of stay on top of fitness behaviors, and enjoy the likes of your Christmas without really kind of noticing many kilos coming onto the scales. By the end of it, keeping on top of some type of minimum amount of activity every single day, even Christmas Day, is probably an important one to consider. All right, so now that the nutrition is out of the way, we need to talk about alcohol, because alcohol is in Ireland synonymous with Christmas, and it is ultimately the thing that kind of makes managing body weight that little bit harder across the Christmas period too, because despite your best intentions, once alcohol is thrown into the mix, all those intentions go out the window, right? Like, it's like, how many of you have had the best intentions in the world, and then you start having a few pints, and then those intentions just go out the fucking window, right? It happens to me all the time. So alcohol is a little bit harder to bring into the equation to manage, purely based off the fact that it does kind of have this like inhibition effect to our goals. And then as well, it is extremely easy to get in a rake of calories just from drinking alcohol. So like a typical pint of Guinness, like, talking like nearly close to 300 calories, right? And a pint of Guinness is very creamy, it's very tasty, and it's very easy to put away 6 of them. And by the time you've had 6 of them, you could have had 6 alongside your Christmas dinner, and that's just adding in like another 2,000 calories to the allotment that you've had, right? Now, again, this comes down to how you want to enjoy your Christmas and what you're willing to make trade-offs on, okay? Because the issue really with alcohol is not necessarily the kind of 1 or 2 drinks. It's really just like the frequency and the dosage of them, okay? Because like the more drinking events that you have across Christmas, like ultimately that, alongside trying to manage your calorie intake and manage all these nutritional decisions, it just becomes that little bit more challenging. So I do think it's really important for you, especially if you are a big drinker across Christmas, to consider that, right? I'm not going to tell you from moral high ground how to fucking do it, because again, I'm not the person to decide that for you, right? I can only speak from my point of view. I will drink on limited occasions throughout Christmas. This Christmas, I am probably only going to drink once. I've drank more this year than I've drank in the last 4 years combined, just a result of fucking weddings and stags and everything like that, trips to Ibiza, and I've just had enough. So I'm only just going to commit myself to drinking once this year. Previous times, I've drank 3-4 times across the Christmas period. However, that pales in comparison to some people. Some people are going to drink almost every day. And for those people, I'm not going to lie, they're not going to be the people who are going to be bastions of health and fitness. And if you're somebody who does want to be a bit more kind of fitness oriented, you do want to be somebody who is, again, keeping in mind performance, you're keeping in mind your body composition, drinking every single day, it's unlikely to be something that's on the cards for you, especially if you are considering Irish quantities. Okay, so it's important to kind of bake that into your decision across the Christmas period. Maybe think about, okay, how many times across the Christmas period am I going to be introducing alcohol, and how much am I going to be committing to? Again, there's going to be some occasions, like the night out I have with my friends, where I'm going to be drinking a lot. I'm not going to be cautious of how much I'm drinking, because again, the frequency of how often I drink across the Christmas period is not necessarily something I really need to be concerned about. So I don't really need to consider the dosage. But if I was having 3, 4, 5 nights out across Christmas, I need to be more mindful about the dosage then. Does that make sense? Because again, the dosage and the accumulation of that across many days is an issue, right? And it's not necessarily that the alcohol itself then is also something that's posing an issue, but it is also our habits and behaviors after that, right? Most people have a night out, they drink lots of alcohol, the next day is right off, eat like shit, they don't get out and do any activity, and it might take a few more days to get back to the gym, okay? The ideal scenario is you go out, you have your night out, wake up the next day, you obviously are ropey, you still make some nutritional decisions that are in line with your goals. I've talked about this in previous episodes. You have some food stocked in the fridge that you can easily prepare, easily make. You, at the very least, try to hit your calories and hit your macros in that day. You get out for a bit of steps. The next day rolls around, you're back into gym and back into routine fully. That's the ideal scenario, but it doesn't happen for everybody. And if that doesn't happen, if that's how it doesn't happen for you, right? If that's not the routine that you follow, where you have very quick time between the night out to getting back into routine, then that's definitely something that you need to consider about the amount of drinking events that you do have across Christmas, if you are somebody who's looking to manage your body composition and manage performance during this period. Now, one of the other reasons why it does make that a little bit more it does make it a little bit more difficult to put alcohol into the equation is because how easy it is to put away drink itself. right? So when we're considering drinking alcohol or drinking calories full stop, right? They don't have as much of an appetite suppressant, right? You don't get full from really drinking calories. So you can consume calories and have no bearing on the likes of satiety, which is why if you are having them baked into the likes of your kind of a way of enjoying Christmas, I do think it's important that you try to be pretty stern with how many drinks you're going to have on any given day. Obviously, the less days that you have alcohol, the better, because it can have some pretty nasty impacts on how you metabolize carbohydrates, fats, and protein, especially over long term. But then as well, how it can impact the likes of your sleep that night, how it can impact your decision making the following day. But again, that's all within your choice. All right. So if that is your choice, what are some other ways that we can go about managing occasions where you're drinking more alcohol and less? Okay. So this is giving you like a really like strict way to enjoy your alcohol as well as make some good progress, right? So I'm talking about this in the context of it's more a night out that's coming up across Christmas versus it being the actual day itself. Okay. So if you are looking to have a couple of drinks, here's a really strict way to do it. So for the day, what you could do is you could restrict your dietary fat intake to about 0.3 grams per kilogram body weight. Okay, so why would we do this? Well, when we drink alcohol, our body views it as a poison. Okay, so our body will start to suppress fat metabolism. It suppresses carbohydrate oxidation, and it suppresses protein metabolism. So by decreasing our dietary fat intake, we're not only making room for the calories you're going to consume through alcohol, we're also limiting our body's inability to essentially process fat on this day. Because once we go into a calorie surplus and we're drinking more alcohol, it does kind of dictate that energy far more towards storage versus oxidation. Okay, so we do, in a sense, want to be limiting our carbs and fats more, but this is just a recommendation that we can start off with likes of dietary fat. So when it does come to likes of limiting carb intake, we can limit this to about 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight, right? So 0.3 grams per kilogram body weight for fats, 1.5 grams per kilogram for body weight for carbs, okay? Now, this is a little bit higher than 0.3 for fat. Well, obviously because fats are more calorie dense, so they're going to have more calories coming alongside them anyway. But then carbohydrates that we're going to be taking in, they should be mainly getting from vegetables. So this could be that across the day, you're essentially limiting your actual carbohydrate sources, you could say, and main fat sources, and mostly getting fats from protein sources and vegetable sources and fruit sources, okay? So if we can do that, that's going to give us a large calorie allotment, but also ensure that we are decreasing our body's ability to like potentially have some storage happen from likes of carbohydrates and fats in the form of adipose tissue. Okay, again, completely theoretical, but this is like a high level way of thinking about it. Now, what we should really be able to do from the likes of the rest of our nutrition is trying to hit our protein intake, okay? Or even a little bit more. So whatever your protein target is, aim for that and maybe a little bit more, okay? The reason I say this is because while carbohydrate and fat, like oxidation and metabolism is going to be impaired, so is muscle protein synthesis. So if muscle protein synthesis is impaired, we still want to ensure that we're getting optimal amounts of this in so that we can still get some, because if like impaired doesn't mean that's like it doesn't happen. It just means it happens to a less efficient degree, but we can still benefit from it. But having more protein and more vegetables, more fruits within the diet on that day just ensures that we're going on that night out without being completely empty. All right, so that's just a theoretical way to do it. Now, I've followed something similar to this before. However, I will also give myself a little bit more carbohydrates and fats just based off my own personal preference and what my current calorie level is, okay? And how much drink I know that I'm going to have that night and based off my preferences. So like, of course, when you're going out on a night out, if you're having more beer, you're having more Guinness, that's going to be something that's going to have a much higher calorie load. And if you're having more cocktails as well and more wine, that's going to have a much higher calorie load relative to if you're going out and getting like vodka soda waters, vodka Coke Zero, and so on, right? If you're going for spirits, you're going to have a much easier time fitting everything in while still being able to enjoy your night out without having to worry too much about like the excess gain or whatever that you're going to feel the next day. I also personally find that I get less of a hangover from having just spirits and sticking to the one spirit per night versus if I am going between beers and spirits. And typically if you go for a little bit of a lighter or clearer color liquor, so it could be like vodka, it could be gin, it could be rum, white rum, you will have less hangover the following day because there's not as much congeners in it. So the things that are kind of making the alcohol darker, the likes of whiskey, dark rum, likes of cognac, for example, these can have a little bit of a harder kind of, or sorry, the actual congeners in them make it a little bit harder for your liver to break down, and as a result, they can have a bit more kind of hangover effects coming to the mix the following day. The worse hangover you have the following day, the harder it is to get up and at it, make some food that's good in line with your nutritional goals, get up and go for a walk, and so on, right? So yeah, essentially, you're kind of making this decision not just from a perspective of it's going to suck less next day, but you're going to be able to get back to adherence to the following day even better, okay? So that is, I guess, a very stringent and anal way to ensure that you're kind of being able to enjoy alcohol while making some adjustments to your nutrition the day of. So just to recap, 0.3 grams per kilogram of your body weight in terms of fats for that day, 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight for the rest of your carbohydrates, hit your protein for that day, and then have the rest of the allotment towards your alcohol intake. Now again, if you are not planning on having that much calories coming from alcohol, you don't need to stick to these numbers religiously. You can bring those numbers up, right? Because it's always going to be based off how much calories that you're having. Big thing that I not recommend doing though is going out starving. So if you follow these numbers, you'll find I'm absolutely ravenous coming up to this night out. It's a good chance that you could over drink and get like absolutely plastered at night. So have a little bit more food. Maybe add a little bit more carbohydrates to one of those meals. That will act as a little bit of soakage so that you can actually enjoy the night out without being carried into the ambulance towards the end of it. However, as I say to all my clients, and as I say to anybody who asks me, how do I manage these nights out myself? Honestly, the most important thing is just how you bounce back after the nights out. So as much planning and preparation as you can do on the day itself where you're having alcohol, as much planning and preparation as you do on the likes of your Christmas day, for example, with your food. It's not necessarily about that day, it's about how you bounce back the following day. The quicker you get back into routine, the more you're able to just isolate these events into the events they are, right? The fun night out with your friends, the amazing Christmas day with your family, the more you're able to just enjoy them, soak it up, and have it for what it is, and get back to seeking towards your goal every other day, the less neurotic you become about these events, and the better you're able to enjoy them. Because I guarantee you, the more neurotic you get around this time of year, the harder and more stressful the Christmas period is going to be. I used to get really, really stressed about Christmas period because I would think that I'm going to ruin my progress. I'm going to gain loads of body fat. I'm going to get really weak. I'm going to become really detrained from, maybe not being consistent, or maybe having my training program to be a little bit more erratic across the Christmas period. And I tell you, it's never happened, right? Every single Christmas, I have been able to continue moving forward, right? Some of my best gains have been made in the weeks after Christmas and the weeks leading up to Christmas. So just try not to freak out too much about the time of year it is. Some of the stuff I talk about here today is going to land with you, and you're going to be able to use, and it's going to stick with you, and you're going to get a lot of value from. Some stuff you may not be ready for. Some stuff you might find to be completely useless, and that's okay. These are just approaches that I've used. They're approaches I've helped I've used with clients, and they're approaches that have had success. So take for that what you will. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as I said at the very, very start of the podcast, enjoy your Christmas period the way you want to. Okay. However, whatever way you enjoy it, be open to accepting the trade-offs, open to accepting the consequences that come from enjoying it the way that you want to. Whether that's you come out the back end having been more rigid, more strict, and as a result, maybe you don't get invited to as many Christmas parties next year, or you enjoyed it a little bit too much and you have a little bit more work to do in the diet phase in January. Whatever it is, whatever way you want to enjoy Christmas, completely your prerogative. So, if you are somebody who needs more guidance across the Christmas period, of course, drop me a DM. I've got coaching spaces available. But other than that, yeah, hopefully you did enjoy the podcast. Hopefully you got something from it. I do have a free PDF that goes through everything I've talked about today. If you want access to that PDF, again, just drop me a DM. If you want access to the exercise Google folder that I mentioned earlier on with home workouts, drop me a DM. Other than that, hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. Sure luck. We will catch you in the next one.